She wore a simple grey hoodie and sweatpants, holding a coffee cup that looked older than the intern at the check-in desk. To manager Silas Thorne, Elara looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong terminal. "Economy is that way, sweetheart," he sneered, pointing to the back of the hall. He didn't know that the woman standing before him wasn't just a passenger. She was the majority shareholder of the entire airline. He humiliated her in front of 300 people. 10 minutes later, Elara made one silent gesture, and Silas didn't just lose his job, he discovered a dark secret that would send him to prison. The automatic doors of JFK's Terminal 4 slid open, letting in a gust of biting November wind and the scent of exhaust fumes mixed with rain. Elara Vance pulled her hood up slightly, shielding her face from the harsh fluorescent lighting. She was exhausted. After a 72-hour negotiation marathon in Tokyo regarding the acquisition of a lithium mining conglomerate, all she wanted was to get home to New York, take a hot shower, and sleep for a week. She adjusted the strap of her battered leather duffel bag. It was a vintage piece, passed down from her grandfather, but to the untrained eye, it looked like something picked up at a thrift store. Elara preferred it that way. In her world, the high-stakes world of venture capital and hostile takeovers, blending in was a weapon. If they didn't see you coming, they couldn't block the strike. Tonight, however, she wasn't hunting. She was just a passenger on Flight 882 to London, a connecting leg she had to take due to a mechanical failure on her private jet. Her assistant, Greg, had booked her a seat in the ultra-exclusive Diamond Sovereign class, a cabin reserved for diplomats, royalty, and the quiet billionaires who ran the world. Elara approached the check-in counter, marked Sovereign Class. The carpet here was plush, distinct from the thin grey tiling of the main concourse. There was no line. A single man stood behind the marble podium, typing furiously on a keyboard. His name tag read, Silas Thorne, Senior Shift Manager. Silas was a man who clearly valued appearance. His uniform was tailored a little too tightly around the arms, his hair was gelled into an immobile wave, and he wore a watch that looked expensive from a distance, but was clearly a knockoff up close. He was currently berating a junior female colleague in a hushed, venomous whisper. "I don't care if his bag is 2 pounds over, Beatrice," Silas hissed. "That's Mr. Sterling. You waive the fee. You smile. You thank him. Do I have to teach you how to breathe too?" The young woman, Beatrice, looked on the verge of tears. She nodded quickly, clutching a boarding pass. Elara cleared her throat. "Excuse me." Silas didn't look up. He held up a single finger, silencing her while he finished typing a note on his screen. The disrespect was practiced, smooth. It was the behavior of a man who enjoyed the tiny kingdom he ruled behind the counter. Elara waited. She counted to 10. The hustle of the airport buzzed behind her. Families arguing, wheels clacking on tile, the drone of announcements. Finally, Silas sighed, a dramatic exhalation of a man burdened by the incompetence of the world. He looked up. His eyes scanned Elara from top to bottom. He saw the oversized grey hoodie, the comfortable sweatpants, the lack of makeup, and the messy bun. He saw her black skin. The professional smile he usually reserved for this counter didn't appear. Instead, his lip curled slightly. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. "The restrooms are back toward the entrance." "I'm checking in," Elara said, her voice calm, low, and possessing a timbre of authority that usually made boardrooms go silent. She placed her passport on the marble counter. "Elara Vance, Flight 882. Silas didn't touch the passport. He laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound. "Miss, you must be confused. This is the Sovereign line. It's for first class and priority status members only." He pointed a manicured finger over her shoulder, toward a chaotic mass of people snaking through the main stanchions. Economy check-in is Zone D, about a 10-minute walk that way. If you run, you might not miss the bag drop cutoff. Elara didn't move. She kept her hand on her passport. I am aware of where economy is, Mr. Thorne. I am also aware that my ticket is for this counter. Silas leaned forward, his elbows resting on the marble. He dropped the facade of customer service entirely. Look, I've had a long shift. I don't have time for pranksters, influencers trying to get a free upgrade, or people who can't read signs. This lane requires a ticket that costs more than most people make in a year. So, do yourself a favor. Take your little bag and go to the back of the line where you belong before I call security. The air between them grew heavy. Beatrice, the junior agent, looked up from her computer, her eyes wide with panic. She seemed to recognize something, perhaps not Elara's face, but the tone of her voice. Mr. Thorne, Beatrice whispered urgently. Maybe we should check her name. The manifest updated 5 minutes ago with a VVIP. Quiet, Beatrice, Silas snapped, not looking at her. He kept his eyes locked on Elara, engaging in a silent power struggle he thought he had already won. I know a VVIP when I see one, and I know a glitch in the system when I see one. We get these fraudulent bookings all the time. Stolen credit cards, fake profiles. He looked back at Elara. Let me guess. You forgot your confirmation number? Your phone is dead? Elara reached into her pocket. She didn't pull out a phone. She pulled out a sleek, matte black card made of anodized titanium. There were no numbers on it, just a small silver chip and a signature etched in gold. It was a Centurion shadow card. Invite only, less than 50 in existence worldwide. She slid it across the marble. It made a heavy metallic clink sound. Scan it, Elara said. Silas looked at the card. For a second, hesitation flickered in his eyes. But his ego was a runaway train, and he wasn't about to pull the brakes for a woman in sweatpants. He picked up the card, weighing it in his hand, and then tossed it back onto the counter with a clatter. I'm not scanning that, Silas sneered. I've seen these props on TikTok. You think I'm stupid? You think you can bully your way into a seat meant for senators and CEOs? He grabbed his radio. Security to Sovereign Desk. I have a disruptive passenger refusing to vacate the area. Potential fraud attempt. Elara's expression didn't change, but her eyes went cold. It was the look she gave before she dismantled a company and sold it for parts. You're making a mistake, Silas. A very expensive one. The only mistake I made was being polite enough to talk to you, Silas shot back. Now move, or get moved. A crowd was starting to form. People in the nearby business class line were craning their necks. Several were holding up phones, recording the interaction. This was the era of the viral video, and Silas was giving a masterclass in bias. Among the onlookers was a tall man in a bespoke suit, looking at his watch impatiently. This was Philip Sterling, the man Silas had been fawning over earlier. What is the hold-up, Thorne? Sterling boomed, stepping up to the counter. I need my boarding pass printed. I don't have time to watch you babysit the charity cases. Silas immediately shifted demeanor, turning his back on Elara to address Sterling with an oily smile. Apologies, Mr. Sterling. Just handling some trash. Security is on the way. I'll have you sorted in 30 seconds. Trash, Elara repeated softly. The word hung in the air. She picked up her titanium card and her passport. She took one step back, creating space. She wasn't leaving, but she was changing the battlefield. 2 security guards, looking winded and annoyed, jogged up to the desk. Problem here, Mr. Thorne. Her, Silas pointed without looking up from Sterling's ticket. Trespassing, harassment, attempted fraud. Escort her out of the terminal. Put her on the no-fly list for the day. The taller guard approached Elara. He reached out to grab her arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Elara didn't resist physically, but she raised her hand, palm out, fingers splayed. It was a command to stop. It was so sharp, so absolute, that the guard actually froze. "Don't touch me," she said. She wasn't shouting. Her voice was deadly quiet. "If you put a hand on me, you will be unemployed before the sun rises." The guard hesitated, looking at Silas. "Boss?" "Get her out of here," Silas screamed, losing his composure. "Drag her if you have to." Elara reached into her hoodie pocket again. This time she pulled out her phone. She didn't dial 911. She didn't dial customer service. She dialed a number that went directly to a private office on the 44th floor of a building in downtown Chicago, the headquarters of the airline. "You have exactly 10 seconds to check the name on that passport, Silas," Elara said, holding the phone to her ear, "because once I make this call, the window of mercy closes." Silas laughed, handing Mr. Sterling his boarding pass. "Call whoever you want. Call your mum. Call the president. You aren't getting on this plane." Elara pressed the call button. "Hey, David," she said into the phone, her eyes never leaving Silas's face. "It's Elara. I'm at JFK. We have a problem with your management staff." No, don't apologize yet. Just listen. I need you to authorize a code 0 on flight 882. The color drained from Beatrice's face behind the counter. She knew what a code 0 was. It was a myth, a ghost story among airline staff. It meant total asset freeze. Silas, however, was too busy laughing with Mr. Sterling to notice the shift in the atmosphere. He didn't know that the silence falling over the terminal wasn't compliance. It was the calm before the tsunami. David lived in a world of high-altitude stress, but hearing Elara Vance's voice on his private line while she was standing in one of his terminals was a different kind of terror. On the other end of the line, Elara could hear the rustle of expensive sheets and the sudden, sharp intake of breath as the CEO of Horizon Air woke up fully. "Elara, did you say code 0? David's voice cracked slightly. Are you safe? Is it a hijacking?" "It's a hijacking of dignity, David," Elara said, her eyes locked on Silas Thorne. Silas was currently leaning over the counter, laughing with Mr. Sterling, completely ignoring the woman who held his professional life in her hand. "I'm standing at Gate 12 in JFK. Your senior shift manager, Mr. Thorne, has refused to scan my ticket. He has accused me of fraud. He has refused to look at my ID. And he has ordered security to physically remove me because I don't fit the profile of your sovereign class." "I'm calling the station manager right now," David stammered. "I'm so sorry, Elara. I'll have him fired immediately. Please, just put him on the phone." "No," Elara said. Her voice was ice. "It's too late for that. He had his chance. He mocked me. He humiliated me in front of a terminal full of people, and now he's ignoring me to fawn over a man who just bribed him." She had seen it. A quick exchange of a folded $100 bill when Silas handed Sterling the boarding pass. It was subtle, practiced. "I am enacting the owner's prerogative, David. Clause 14 of the acquisition contract. I am grounding Flight 8822. Effective immediately. Wipe the manifest. Lock the gate." "Elara, that flight is full," David pleaded. "The logistics. Do it," she commanded. "Or I sell my shares tomorrow morning. You know what happens to the stock price if Vance Capital pulls out." There was a pause, a heavy, terrifying silence on the line. Then, David whispered, "Okay. Doing it now. Give me 30 seconds. Elara lowered the phone. She didn't hang up. She just held it at her side, waiting. Silas finished his joke with Sterling and finally turned his sneering gaze back to Elara. Still here? You really are a glutton for punishment. Officers, why is she still standing? The security guard reached for Ilara's arm again. Ma'am, last warning. Suddenly, a loud, discordant buzz echoed through the area. It wasn't the fire alarm. It was the sound of the terminal computers dying. Every screen behind the check-in desk, the ones displaying seat maps, flight paths, and upgrade lists, flickered once, turned a bright, angry red, and then went black. The large LCD monitor above the gate that read, Flight 882 to London, on time, blinked out. When it came back on a second later, the text had changed. Flight 882, cancelled. System lockout. The hum of the ticket printers stopped. The conveyor belt behind the desk, which had been carrying Mr. Sterling's expensive Louis Vuitton bags, ground to a halt with a screech of rubber. "What the hell?" Silas muttered. He banged on his keyboard. "Beatrice, what did you do?" "I didn't touch anything," Beatrice cried, her hands raised in surrender. "My screen is locked. It says, Administrative Override, Level Alpha." Silas stared at his screen. A dialog box had popped up, overriding all other windows. It contained no buttons, no options to close it. Just text in white against a black background. Terminal access revoked. User: Thorne, Silas, suspended. Authorization: Vance Capital. Silas blinked. He read the name again. Vance Capital. He knew the name. Everyone in the industry knew the name. Vance Capital was the massive private equity firm that had bailed out the airline 3 years ago. They owned the planes, the fuel contracts, and the debt. He looked up slowly. The woman in the grey hoodie was watching him. She hadn't moved. She hadn't screamed. She just stood there, her phone in her hand, looking at him with an expression of profound disappointment. "What did you do?" Silas whispered. The arrogance was beginning to crack, replaced by a dawn of confusion. Did you hack the system?" "I didn't hack it," Ilara said calmly, stepping forward. The security guards, sensing the shift in momentum, stepped back. "I own it." Mr. Sterling turned around, annoyed. "Thorne, what is going on? My bag is stuck halfway down the belt. I need to get to the lounge." I can't print the lounge pass, Mr. Sterling," Silas stammered, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "The system is down. It's saying the flight is cancelled." "Cancelled?" Sterling roared. "It's perfect weather. You can't cancel a flight 10 minutes before boarding." The commotion began to spread. The passengers in the economy line, who had been watching the scene unfold, started to murmur. Phones were raised higher. The spectacle of the homeless-looking woman getting arrested had suddenly turned into a technological mystery. Then the jetway door behind the desk flew open. Captain James Miller, a veteran pilot with 30 years of experience, stormed out. He was wearing his full uniform, hat under his arm, looking furious. "Thorne!" Captain Miller barked. "Why did my flight computer just dump the entire flight plan? I just got a message from A-Cars saying the aircraft has been deregistered. Ground control is telling me to kill the engines. We have fuel loaded. What button did you push?" Silas was trembling now. He looked from the captain to the black screen, then to Ilara. The pieces were floating in his mind, but he was too terrified to put them together. I don't know," Silas stuttered. "This woman. She did something with her phone." Captain Miller turned his gaze to Ilara. He narrowed his eyes. He didn't see a woman in a hoodie. He saw the posture. He saw the face he had seen in the company newsletter 6 months ago, when the new board of directors was announced. The captain's face went pale. He immediately straightened his posture, dropped his hat to his side, and bowed his head slightly, a sign of immense respect. "Miss Vance," the captain said, his voice changing from anger to deferential shock. I wasn't informed you were flying with us today. My apologies." The silence that followed was absolute. Silas looked at the captain. You know her. She's a fraud, Captain. She has a fake card." "Shut up, Silas," the captain snapped, not looking at him. "You are speaking to the chairwoman of the board." Silas felt his knees turn to water. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The woman in the hoodie, the trash, the person he had told to use the bathroom at the entrance. Elara walked past the security guards, who were now looking at their boots, wishing they could become invisible. She approached the counter. She didn't look at Silas, she looked at Beatrice. "Beatrice, is it?" Elara asked gently. "Yes, ma'am," Beatrice squeaked. "You tried to warn him," Elara said. "I heard you. You did your job. You can log out now. You're taking the rest of the night off. With pay." Elara then turned her gaze to Silas. He was gripping the edge of the marble counter, his knuckles white. He looked like a man who had just watched a ghost walk out of a mirror. "Mr. Thorne," Elara said softly, "you have a lot of explaining to do. And unfortunately for you, my cancellation of this flight has just alerted the regional director. I believe I see him running this way." The chaos in Terminal 4 was now palpable. 300 passengers were realizing that their trip to London was in jeopardy. The groan of collective frustration was rising, a physical wave of noise. But inside the sovereign class circle, the atmosphere was suffocatingly quiet. Running down the concourse, flanked by 2 breathless assistants, was Marcus Henderson, the regional director for the entire East Coast operation. Marcus was a man who prided himself on efficiency. He was immaculately dressed, always calm, and knew the name of every high-value client. When he received the Code Zero alert on his iPad, he had nearly fainted. He burst through the crowd, pushing past the confused onlookers. When he saw Elara standing there in her sweatpants and Silas trembling behind the desk, the color drained from his face. "Miss Vance!" Marcus gasped, trying to catch his breath. He ignored Silas completely. He ignored Mr. Sterling. He went straight to Elara, extending a shaking hand, which he then retracted, unsure if he was allowed to touch her. I am mortified. David called me. I got here as fast as I could." "Hello, Marcus," Elara said. She sounded tired. "I wish I could say it's good to see you." "We can fix this," Marcus said, rapidly, his eyes darting around the scene. "I have a limo pulling up curbside. We can take you to the private terminal. We can have the backup jet prepped in an hour. Please allow me to escort you away from this." He gestured vaguely at Silas. "No," Elara said. "I'm not going anywhere. Not until we resolve the issue of Mr. Thorne." Marcus turned slowly to face Silas. The look on the director's face was one of pure, unadulterated fury. "Silas, give me your badge. Now!" Silas, usually so quick with a retort, so sharp with his insults, was paralyzed. He fumbled with the clip on his lapel. "Mr. Henderson, please. I didn't know. She didn't look like a VIP. She was wearing a hoodie. She looked like she belonged in economy." "Is that company policy, Silas?" Elara interrupted. Her voice carried, cutting through the noise of the terminal. "Does the manual state that we treat people based on the cost of their clothing? Does it say we judge respect based on the brand of a handbag?" No, of course not," Silas whispered, his face burning red. "But we have protocols to protect the premium passengers from riffraff." "Riffraff," Elara repeated. She turned to the crowd. 100 phones were recording her. She knew this would be on YouTube in an hour. She decided to give them a show they would learn from. "I grew up in a neighborhood not far from here," Elara said, addressing Silas but speaking to the room. "My father was a janitor at this very airport. He wore a grey uniform every day. He saved every penny so I could go to school. If he had walked up to this counter, tired after a double shift, wanting to visit his family, would you have called him trash? Would you have called security on him? Silas couldn't answer. He looked down at his fake watch. You judged me because of my skin and my clothes, Ilara continued. You assumed I had no power because I didn't flaunt it. And that is why you are dangerous. Not because you're rude, but because you are blind. I'm sorry, Silas choked out. I'll upgrade you. I'll do anything. You can't upgrade the owner, Silas, Ilara said. She turned to Marcus. Marcus, I want a full audit of this station's upgrades for the last 6 months, specifically cash upgrades processed manually. Silas's head snapped up. His eyes went wide with genuine terror, far worse than the fear of losing his job. This was the fear of a man with a secret. Miss Vance, Silas stammered, his voice rising an octave. That's not necessary. It's just a misunderstanding. I resign. I quit. You don't need to do an audit. Ilara smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You resign? I don't think so. You're detained. Security? The same guards who had tried to arrest Ilara minutes earlier stepped forward. They looked confused but followed the hierarchy of power. They moved to stand on either side of Silas. Why an audit? Marcus asked, confused but taking notes on his iPad. Because, Ilara said, pointing to Mr. Sterling, who was trying to sneak away from the counter. Mr. Sterling just handed Silas a $100 bill, and Silas waived the overweight fee and printed a priority boarding pass. Sterling froze. I did no such thing. This is outrageous. Beatrice, Ilara called out. The young woman stepped forward from the back office. She looked terrified, but she looked at Ilara, and she found courage. Beatrice, have you seen Mr. Thorne take cash payments before? Beatrice bit her lip. She looked at Silas, who was glaring at her with a look of murderous intent. Then she looked at the crying mother in the economy line who had been yelled at by Silas earlier. Yes, Beatrice whispered. Almost every shift. He sells the empty sovereign seats to his friends or people who pay him cash. He puts it in the system as a comp upgrade for service recovery. He pockets the money. The gasp from the crowd was audible. This wasn't just rudeness anymore. This was embezzlement. This was a federal crime. Silas lunged. You lying little... The security guard tackled Silas into the conveyor belt. His gelled hair smashed against the rubber. The expensive watch flew off his wrist and skittered across the floor, breaking open to reveal cheap plastic gears. Get off me! Silas screamed. You can't do this! I run this terminal. Not anymore, Marcus said coldly. Take him to the Port Authority office. I'm pressing charges for theft and corporate fraud. As they dragged Silas away, kicking and screaming, shouting obscenities that echoed off the high ceilings, Ilara didn't watch him go. She turned her attention to the 300 angry passengers who were currently stranded because of her Code Zero. She picked up the PA microphone at the desk. It squealed slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, Ilara's voice boomed over the speakers. The terminal went silent. My name is Ilara Vance. I am the majority shareholder of this airline. I apologize for the disruption. The previous flight crew and management have been relieved of duty. She looked at the weary faces in the crowd. Families, students, business travelers. I grounded this plane because I refuse to let it fly under the command of a man who lacks basic humanity. But I will not let you pay the price for his arrogance. She looked at Marcus. Marcus, unlock the system. Reinstate the flight. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said, typing furiously on Beatrice's computer. However, Ilara continued into the mic. Because of the delay, and because you had to witness this unfortunate scene, everyone on Flight 882 is getting a full refund of their ticket price." Cheers erupted from the back of the hall. "And," Ilara raised a hand, "since Mr. Thorne was so concerned about who belongs in Sovereign class, I am opening the Sovereign cabin. It is no longer reserved for VIPs. Beatrice, please select the first 12 families with small children from the economy line and upgrade them to the sleeper suites." The cheering turned into a roar of applause. People were high-fiving. The tension evaporated, replaced by the thrill of unexpected justice. Ilara placed the microphone down. She felt the adrenaline crashing. She just wanted to go home. But as she picked up her battered leather bag, Marcus cleared his throat. "Miss Vance, there is one problem," he said, quietly. "What is it, Marcus?" "In the confusion, the system flagged Mr. Sterling's passport. When we tried to cancel his ticket, well, the Department of Homeland Security just pinged our server. It seems Mr. Sterling wasn't just buying an upgrade." Ilara frowned. She looked over at the bespoke-suited man who was currently being blocked by 2 other security guards from leaving the area. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Marcus whispered, leaning in, "Mr. Thorne might have inadvertently been helping to smuggle a fugitive out of the country, and by grounding the plane, you just trapped him." Ilara looked at Sterling. He wasn't arrogant anymore. He was sweating, his eyes darting toward the exits like a trapped rat. "Part 4 is going to be interesting," Ilara murmured to herself. The atmosphere in Terminal 4 shifted instantly from a customer service dispute to a federal incident. The air grew heavy, charged with the static of high-stakes panic. Mr. Sterling, whose real name was yet to be confirmed, had stopped shouting about his rights. He was now backing away slowly, his eyes darting between the glass exit doors and the growing wall of security personnel. Ilara Vance watched him with the analytical precision that made her a billionaire. She saw the micro-expressions, the twitch in his jaw, the way his hand hovered near his inner jacket pocket, the sweat breaking out along his hairline despite the cool air conditioning. "Marcus," Ilara said, her voice low. "Don't let him near the escalator. If he gets to the lower level, he can mix with the arriving passengers." "Security is blocking the perimeter," Marcus replied, tapping his earpiece. "But DHS is still 3 minutes out. They're coming from the International Arrivals Hall." Sterling realized his window was closing. He looked at the 2 private security guards blocking his path, large men, but ultimately rent-a-cops. Then he looked at Ilara. He made a calculation. "You!" Sterling snarled, pointing a shaking finger at Ilara. "This is your fault. If you had just gone to economy like a good little girl, none of this would have happened. If you were an honest man, Mr. Sterling, a delay wouldn't make you sweat this much," Ilara countered calmly. Sterling lunged, but he didn't run for the exit. He ran for the baggage belt. It was a desperate, chaotic move. He vaulted over the check-in scale, his expensive Italian loafers skidding on the marble, and scrambled onto the rubber conveyor belt that had frozen when Ilara initiated the code 0. He was trying to crawl through the baggage chute, the hole in the wall where the bags disappeared into the bowels of the airport. "He's going for the tarmac!" Captain Miller shouted. "Stop the belt!" Marcus yelled, though the belt was already stopped. Sterling was clawing at the rubber flaps of the chute, trying to squeeze his large frame through the opening. He was halfway through, his legs kicking wildly in the air, when the automatic fire shutters, triggered by the security lockdown Ilara had authorized, began to descend. The heavy steel gate slammed down, not crushing him, but blocking his path completely. Sterling let out a howl of frustration and scrambled back out, tumbling off the belt and landing in a heap at Ilara's feet. Before he could stand, 3 officers were on him. "Get off me! Do you know who I am?" Sterling screamed, his face pressed against the dirty terminal carpet. "That," a new voice boomed, "is exactly what we're here to find out." The crowd parted. Striding through the terminal were 4 agents wearing FBI windbreakers. Leading them was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite, Special Agent Thomas Kincaid. Elara knew the name. Kincaid was legendary in the white-collar crimes division. Kincaid didn't look at Elara. He walked straight to Sterling, hauled him up by his collar, and slammed him against the check-in desk. "Arthur Penhaligon," Kincaid said, his voice gravelly. "Alias Philip Sterling, alias Robert Grave. You're a hard man to catch, Arthur." The crowd gasped. Phones were zoomed in. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sterling, now Penhaligon, spat. "I'm a British citizen. I demand my consulate." "You're a fugitive wanted for a $400 million Ponzi scheme in Seattle," Kincaid said, snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. "And you were about 5 hours away from disappearing into non-extradition territory." Kincaid finally turned to Elara. He nodded, a brief acknowledgement of one professional to another. "Ms. Vance, we've been tracking his credit card usage for weeks. We lost him in the tri-state area. When your system went dark and then rebooted, it forced a hard refresh of the passenger manifest against the NCIC database. It pinged his fake passport instantly. You flushed him out." "Happy to help, Agent Kincaid," Elara said, crossing her arms. "But I have a question. How did a man on the most wanted list get a boarding pass in a high-security airport without triggering a red flag earlier?" Kincaid frowned. "He shouldn't have. His passport is flagged. The moment it was scanned at the kiosk or the desk, the silent alarm should have tripped." Elara turned her head slowly toward the side office, where Silas Thorne was currently being detained by the Port Authority police. "The passport wasn't scanned," Elara said, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. "Silas." "Excuse me?" Kincaid asked. "My manager," Elara said, her voice cold. "Silas Thorne. He didn't scan the passport. He manually entered the data. He bypassed the biometric check." Beatrice, standing nearby, nodded furiously. "He did! He typed it in. He said the scanner was acting up again. He does it for all his special guests." Kincaid's eyes narrowed. He motioned to his team. "Bring the manager out here, now." The Port Authority officers dragged Silas back into the main area. Silas looked like a wreck. His uniform was disheveled, his face was tear-streaked, and he was hyperventilating. "I didn't know!" Silas screamed as soon as he saw the FBI jackets. "I swear I didn't know he was a fugitive. He just tipped me. That's all. It was just a tip." "A tip?" Kincaid stepped into Silas's personal space. "You overrode a federal security protocol for a tip? How much, Silas?" $100, Silas sobbed. "Just $100. Kincaid looked at Elara, then back at Silas with disgust. "You sold out your country's border security for $100? You better hope that's all it was, kid. Because if we find out you knew what was in his bags, you're looking at 20 years for aiding and abetting a felon." "Bags?" Silas froze. His eyes went wide. I waived the fee. I didn't check them." Elara stepped forward. "The bags, Agent Kincaid. The Louis Vuitton trunks." Silas marked them as carry-on approved in the system, so they wouldn't go through the deep scan X-ray in the basement. He sent them down the VIP chute. The VIP chute bypasses the main explosive detection systems for expedited loading, Captain Miller added, looking horrified. "It's meant for diplomatic pouches." Kincaid grabbed his radio. "Bomb squad! Now! Isolate the baggage hold of Flight 8822. We have unchecked luggage on board." The terminal erupted into fresh panic. The next hour was a blur of controlled chaos. The terminal was partially evacuated. Elara refused to leave. This was her airline, her plane, and her responsibility. She stood behind the police tape, watching as the bomb squad robot wheeled 2 massive Louis Vuitton trunks out of the baggage sorting area and onto the tarmac. The passengers of Flight 882 were pressed against the glass windows of the terminal, watching the scene unfold on the runway below. It was like a movie, but the fear was real. "If those are bombs," Captain Miller whispered to Ilara, "we are finished. The brand will never recover." "They aren't bombs," Ilara said, her eyes fixed on the trunks. "Men like Penhaligon don't blow things up. They steal things. Those bags were too heavy. Silas said Beatrice wanted to charge him for being 2 pounds over, but Penhaligon was sweating. He didn't want anyone touching those bags." On the tarmac, the bomb squad technician gave the all clear signal regarding explosives. They pried the locks open. Kincaid, wearing gloves, stepped forward to inspect the contents. He opened the first lid. He paused. Then he opened the second one. He looked up at the control tower, then turned and looked up at the terminal window where Ilara was standing. He held up a hand, signaling for her to come down. Ilara, accompanied by Captain Miller and Marcus, took the service elevator down to the tarmac level. The wind was louder here, the smell of jet fuel overpowering. "What is it?" Ilara asked as she approached the open trunks. "See for yourself," Kincaid said, stepping aside. Ilara looked inside. The first trunk wasn't filled with clothes. It was filled with stacks of high-density server hard drives, wrapped in anti-static foam. "That's the data," Kincaid said. "The algorithms, the offshore account ledgers, the blackmail material he has on half the tech CEOs in Seattle. This is the insurance he was trying to smuggle to London." "And the other one?" Ilara asked, looking at the second trunk. "Gold," Kincaid said. "And not just any gold." He pulled back a cloth covering. Beneath it were rows of small, unmarked gold bars, but packed between them were vacuum-sealed bricks of cash, euros, pounds, Swiss francs. "There must be $5 million in cash and gold here," Kincaid estimated. "And thanks to your manager's VIP treatment, it almost flew out of the country without a customs declaration." Ilara felt a cold fury rising in her chest. She turned around and walked back toward the elevator. Silas was being held in a police van near the terminal entrance. She needed to look him in the eye one last time. When she emerged back into the terminal, the police were just closing the doors of the van. Silas was handcuffed in the back. He saw Ilara approaching and threw himself against the wire mesh of the window. "Miss Vance!" he screamed. "Please! I didn't know about the gold. I didn't know! I have a family. I have a mortgage!" Ilara signaled for the officer to pause. She walked up to the window. The reflection showed her own face. Tired, no makeup, still in her hoodie, superimposed over Silas's terrified expression. "You have a mortgage, Silas?" she asked softly. "Yes. Please, just tell them it was a mistake. Don't let them take me." "The woman you yelled at earlier," Ilara said, her voice unyielding. "The mother with the 3 kids in economy. I spoke to her while the bomb squad was working. Do you know why she was flying?" Silas blinked, confused by the question. "What? Who cares?" "She was flying to London for a funeral," Ilara said. "Her husband died last week. She scraped together every dollar she had for those tickets. She was 2 pounds overweight on her luggage because she was carrying his ashes in a heavy urn. And you made her cry. You humiliated her. You threatened to charge her a fee she couldn't afford." Silas went silent. "But for a man in a suit who flashed $100 bill," Ilara continued, "you were willing to risk the safety of 300 people. You were willing to let a criminal smuggle millions of dollars and stolen data." "It was just business," Silas whispered weakly. "No," Ilara said, stepping back. "It was character, and yours is bankrupt." She turned to the police officer. Take him away." As the van drove off, Marcus approached Ilara. He looked exhausted. "The flight is cleared to reboard, Miss Vance," Marcus said. "We have a new crew coming in. The passengers are, well, they are surprisingly calm. I think the free refund helped. And the show." "Good," Ilara said. "But we aren't done, Marcus." "We aren't?" "No," Ilara said, pulling her hood down and finally letting her hair fall loose. Silas was a symptom, not the disease. He felt comfortable doing what he did because the culture of this terminal allowed it. He thought appearance was currency. She looked at the check-in desk, now manned by Beatrice, who was efficiently and politely helping passengers rebook. "Promote her," Ilara said, pointing to Beatrice. "Beatrice?" Marcus asked. "She's a junior associate. She's only been here 6 months." "She was the only one who tried to follow the rules," Ilara said. "She was the only one who saw a human being in front of her, not a ticket price. Make her the station manager, effective immediately." "But she has no management experience," Marcus protested. "Then teach her," Ilara commanded. "I'd rather have a kind novice running this station than an experienced crook." Ilara picked up her duffel bag. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her bone-weary. "Where are you going, Miss Vance?" Marcus asked. "The VIP lounge is open. I can have champagne waiting." Ilara smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had shown all night. "No thank you, Marcus. I have a flight to catch, and honestly, I think I'll take that seat in economy. I hear the people back there are much better company." She began to walk away, but she stopped. A thought occurred to her. The story wasn't quite over. There was one loose end. "Marcus," she called back. "One more thing." "Yes, Miss Vance?" "The $100 bill that Silas took from Sterling. Did the police confiscate it?" "I believe it's in evidence, yes." "Retrieve it," Ilara said. "Frame it and hang it in the break room. Put a plaque under it." "What should the plaque say?" Marcus asked, pulling out his iPad. Ilara thought for a moment. The price of a career. She turned and walked toward the boarding gate, her grey hoodie blending into the crowd. But as she walked, she noticed something. The passengers weren't ignoring her anymore. They were parting the way for her. Not because she was rich, not because she was powerful, but because they had seen what she did. However, as Ilara boarded the plane and took her seat in 34B, a middle seat in economy, she didn't notice the man sitting in the window seat, 34A. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low, and he had been watching the entire spectacle on a live stream on his phone. He looked at Ilara, then looked at his phone, where a message had just popped up on an encrypted app. "Target identified. She is on board. Do not fail." Ilara buckled her seatbelt, closing her eyes, thinking the drama was over. She didn't know that by exposing Penhaligon, she had just kicked a hornet's nest that went far beyond a single airline terminal. The karma had hit Silas hard, but karma has a way of rippling out, and sometimes it hits back. Flight 8822 cruised at 35,000 feet, a pressurized steel tube suspended in the void over the Atlantic. The cabin lights were dimmed to a soft blue, lulling most of the 300 passengers into a fitful sleep. In seat 34B, Ilara Vance tried to close her eyes, but the adrenaline from the terminal was still coursing through her veins like battery acid. She shifted in the narrow economy seat. To her right, in 34C, a young college student was fast asleep, his headphones slipping off his ears. To her left, in the window seat 34A, the man in the baseball cap was wide awake. He had been staring at her for the last 20 minutes. "Can I help you?" Ilara finally whispered, turning to face him. The man smiled, but his eyes remained dead. He slowly removed his cap, revealing a jagged white scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "You've had a busy night, Miss Vance. First you humiliate Silas, then you catch Penhaligon. You're quite the crusader." Ilara's blood ran cold. The cabin noise, the hum of engines, the rattle of the beverage cart far up the aisle, suddenly felt miles away. "Who are you?" "My name is Julian," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the engine drone. "And Penhaligon was just the wallet. I'm the insurance policy for the syndicate. You cost my employers $400 million tonight." Ilara's hand drifted toward the call button, but Julian was faster. He didn't lunge, he simply lowered his hand to his lap. In his grip was a black tactical pen with a hardened tungsten tip. He held it inches from the exposed neck of the sleeping college student next to Ilara. "Don't," Julian whispered. "This tip will pierce his windpipe before you can scream. Now, take out your tablet." "What do you want?" Ilara hissed, freezing in place. "You have override codes," Julian said, his gaze fixed on the tablet in her seat pocket. "Connect to the flight deck. Send a priority command to divert to a private airfield in Nova Scotia. We have a reception committee waiting." "I can't hijack a plane with a tablet," Ilara lied, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You grounded one with a phone call," Julian countered. "Do it. You have 3 minutes before I start carving up the passenger list, starting with this kid." Ilara unlocked her screen, her mind racing. She was trapped. The air marshal was likely rows away, and any sudden move would end in bloodshed. She needed a weapon, but she was in economy. She had a plastic cup and a pretzel wrapper. Then she looked at the floor, specifically under the seat in front of Julian. Sitting in row 33, directly ahead of them, was Mrs. Higgins, and tucked under her seat, protruding slightly into Julian's legroom, was the heavy brass urn containing her husband's ashes. Ilara caught Mrs. Higgins's eye through the gap between the seats. The widow was awake, knitting in the dim light. Ilara didn't dare speak. She reached down, pretending to retrieve her bag, and tapped Mrs. Higgins's ankle. Once. Twice. Then she pointed a trembling finger at the weapon in Julian's hand. Mrs. Higgins squinted, peering through the gap. She saw the tactical pen. She saw the terrified student. And she saw the cold malice in Julian's face. The grief that had weighed Mrs. Higgins down for weeks suddenly hardened into something else. Rage. She turned around in her seat, facing Julian. "Excuse me, young man." Julian looked up, startled. "Turn around, lady. Mind your business." "You're kicking my seat," Mrs. Higgins said loudly, her voice raspy and indignant. "And you're scaring my kids." "I said turn around," Julian snapped, distracted for a split second. That was all Ilara needed. She jammed her elbow into Julian's ribs with all her strength. He grunted, the pen slipping slightly. "Now!" Ilara screamed. Mrs. Higgins didn't hesitate. She grabbed the urn, ripped off the lid, and with a war cry that shook the cabin, she flung the contents directly into Julian's face. A cloud of grey ash exploded into the air. Julian shrieked, clawing at his eyes as the grit blinded him instantly. "He's got a weapon!" Ilara yelled, unbuckling her belt. The sleeping college student woke up with a jolt, saw the man flailing with a weapon, and instinct took over. He tackled Julian into the window. 2 burly construction workers from across the aisle dove into the fray, pinning the assassin's arms. "I can't see!" Julian screamed, coughing up ash. Mrs. Higgins stood over him, clutching the empty urn like a trophy. She looked down at the chaos, dusting her hands off on her floral dress. "Arthur always did hate bullies," she declared, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "I suppose that's one way to scatter him." Flight 882 didn't divert to Nova Scotia. Under the escort of 2 F-16 fighter jets, The Boeing 777 circled back and slammed onto the tarmac of JFK, the tires screeching like a banshee. The moment the wheels touched the ground, the cabin erupted in sobbing relief. The plane taxied to a remote corner of the airfield, far from the terminal, where a phalanx of flashing blue and red lights awaited. The doors were breached not by flight attendants, but by a SWAT team. "Federal agents, heads down!" They moved with precision, storming the economy cabin. Julian, blinded by ash and pinned under the weight of the construction workers, was hauled to his feet. He was screaming threats, his face a mask of grey dust and red rage. As they dragged him down the aisle, he locked eyes with Ilara one last time. "This isn't over, Vance," he spat. "It is for you," Ilara replied, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline shaking her hands. "Enjoy prison. I hear the seats are terrible." Once the assassin was removed, Ilara stood up. She was covered in grey dust, the mortal remains of Mrs. Higgins's husband. She looked at the widow, who was clutching the now empty urn to her chest, looking terrified that she was in trouble. Ilara placed a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. "Don't worry, you aren't in trouble. You're a hero." When they finally deplaned, the scene on the tarmac was chaotic. David, the CEO of Horizon Air, had arrived via helicopter. He ran toward the stairs, his face pale as he saw the state of his majority shareholder. "Ilara," David gasped, looking at her hoodie covered in ash. "We have medics standing by. We have a crisis team." "I am so sorry." "I don't need a medic, David," Ilara said, wiping her face. "I need you to listen." She turned to the group of passengers who had been led off the plane. Mrs. Higgins, the college student, and the two workers. They stood awkwardly on the tarmac, shivering in the cold wind. "These people," Ilara said, pointing to them, "they saved my life. And they saved this airline." She walked over to Mrs. Higgins. "I know nothing can replace what you lost tonight. Your husband's ashes, they saved us all." Mrs. Higgins looked at the empty urn, a sad smile touching her lips. Arthur was a stubborn old mule. He always said he wanted to go out fighting. I guess he got his wish. Ilara nodded, tears stinging her eyes. She turned back to David and Marcus, the regional director. "Marcus, retrieve Silas's badge," Ilara commanded. "It's already done, ma'am. He's being processed at the central precinct." "Good. Now, I want a new directive issued tonight," Ilara announced, her voice carrying over the wind. "Mrs. Higgins and her family are to receive the founder's status. Lifetime unlimited travel, first class, anywhere in the world, and full college tuition for her grandchildren." The weary passengers nearby broke into applause. Mrs. Higgins covered her mouth, weeping silently. "And one more thing," Ilara said, looking back at the plane. "Rebrand the cabins. No more sovereign nonsense. We are in the service business, not the caste system business. If I see another employee treating a passenger like Silas treated me, they won't just be fired. They'll be blacklisted from the industry." "Understood," David said, bowing his head. "Beatrice is already drafting the new protocols." Ilara adjusted her battered leather bag. She was exhausted, dirty, and sore. The limo was waiting, but she hesitated. She looked at the economy passengers huddled together, sharing blankets the paramedics had given them. She realized she didn't want to be in the limo. "David," Ilara said, "cancel the car. I'm going to ride the crew bus back to the terminal with Mrs. Higgins. We have a lot to talk about." As Ilara Vance walked toward the bus, blending in with the people she had fought beside, she realized the truth of the night. Silas had looked at her and seen nothing, but the people in economy had looked at her and seen a human being worth saving. The billionaire boarded the bus, sat in the back row next to the widow, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Ilara Vance proved that true power isn't about the price of your ticket or the clothes on your back. It's about the content of your character. Silas Thorne lost everything because he judged a book by its cover, while a grieving widow in economy became the ultimate hero. It's a harsh lesson in karma. When you look down on people, you never know who you're actually talking to, or who might save your life. What an ending. I still can't believe Mrs. Higgins used the ashes. That is the definition of hard karma. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button to support the channel. And make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next drama. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Ilara's shoes? Thanks for watching.